People think success comes from IQ or hard work. The truth? Without mastering your emotions, both can fail you. You can read every self-help book, but if you can't stay calm in the moments that matter, you'll keep losing ground without even realizing it. Most people believe emotional intelligence is a soft skill. In reality, it's the sharpest tool you'll ever carry into work, love, and life. Welcome to StoicCraft, where ancient Stoic wisdom meets modern challenges. Here, we turn philosophy into a daily practice you can actually live, helping you lead with strength, clarity, and unshakable calm. Have you ever walked away from what seemed like a simple conversation feeling unsettled, shaken, not by the words, but by a cold glance, a subtle tone, or an offhand remark? Ever left a meeting replaying your own words, thinking, "I should have handled that differently"? In those moments, it's not intelligence or willpower you're lacking. It's the ability to understand your own emotions and to read the emotions of others with clarity. Emotional intelligence and social skills are not talents gifted at birth. They're disciplined skills you can train if you have the patience to slow down and the courage to face yourself honestly. In this journey, we'll explore how to develop these skills through the lens of Stoic philosophy. Stoicism is an ancient map for navigating life, used by people who endured fear, pain, and deep inner conflict without losing themselves. It teaches you that you don't need to shout to prove your strength, and you don't need to please everyone to be accepted. What you do need is the awareness to see where your emotions are leading you, and the discipline to take the lead instead. This isn't about quick tips or motivational sound bites. This is about meeting your truest self face to face and deciding you will no longer be a prisoner to emotional reactions. You can be smart, accomplished, and respected, but if you lose control when insulted, if you shut down when someone needs to be heard, if you can't tell when to speak and when to hold back, you're still operating from weakness. Not because you lack knowledge, but because your emotions are running the show. No IQ score can fix that. Emotional intelligence isn't a buzzword. It's the silent foundation beneath every healthy relationship, wise decision, and resilient mind. What truly separates us from other species isn't speed, strength, or sharpness of claw. It's the capacity to think. But thinking alone isn't enough. In real life, we rarely operate on pure logic. You know you shouldn't eat late, but you do. You know that person isn't worth your anger, yet you snap. You know a meeting is important, but one careless comment derails your focus and poisons your response. You know, but you can't control it. That's the blind spot we all carry. Our emotions are ancient survival tools, hardwired into our brains for tens of thousands of years. Fear of sudden noises, anger at threat, joy in belonging to a group. But while the world has changed, our emotional operating system hasn't. We no longer live in the jungle, yet our brains still react as if we do. An ignored email, a critical comment, or a subtle rejection can trigger storms as intense as any fight for survival. That's why emotional intelligence is not a luxury. It's a survival skill. Not so you can seem better, but so you can suffer less. People with emotional intelligence still feel anger, sadness, and insecurity, but they know when they're feeling it, understand why, and choose their response instead of surrendering to the first emotional impulse. That is the difference between instinct and wisdom. Without emotional intelligence, you become your own captor, hurt by throwaway remarks, driven by fear-based choices, sabotaging relationships out of pride, losing yourself in endless comparison and competition. The worst part? You believe the world is hurting you when in reality you've never learned to live at peace with your own emotions. Emotional intelligence grounds you in a chaotic world. It stops you from unraveling after failure. It helps you hold your tongue in anger, stay present in hurt, and wait for clarity before reacting. It lets you connect deeply, not to manipulate, but to understand. It teaches you to reflect before blaming and to find peace without chasing approval. And here's the truth most people miss: EQ doesn't begin with others. It begins with yourself. If you can't read your own emotions, you move through life like a blind traveler in an emotional desert, irritable without knowing why, procrastinating without seeing the cause, exhausted without understanding it's the weight of unprocessed feelings. Real maturity isn't simply pushing through. It's the ability to pause before reacting, to avoid letting invisible feelings grip the wheel. It's staying calm in chaos and remembering emotions are part of you, but they're not the whole of you. Here's the quiet tragedy. The more successful some people become, the more pressure they feel, the lonelier they get, and the more they're torn between logic and emotion. Not because they're weak, but because they've never learned how to read their own inner world. And then one day, they find themselves asking, why am I still not happy, even when I have everything? Without emotional intelligence, you can lose what matters most and not even notice it's slipping away. A partner who truly understands you, a teammate you can depend on, a fragile parent-child bond, quietly asking for healing. All it takes is one moment, a single careless sentence, or a silence where understanding was needed for relationships, trust, or progress to crumble. But when you have emotional intelligence, the game changes entirely. You stop running on autopilot and start living with intention. You respond with clarity instead of lashing out. You face your fears head on and call them by name. You begin to understand that suffering doesn't come from what others do, it comes from how you react to them. And in that shift, you become harder to manipulate, harder to provoke, and far less likely to lose yourself in life's chaos. EQ isn't some soft, optional trait. It's a survival skill. Like knowing how to breathe correctly when you're drowning in overwhelm, it keeps your mind from being pulled under. And like any skill that matters, it's not a gift, it's something you train, sharpen, and strengthen through deliberate practice. To do that, you first need to see EQ for what it really is, not some vague personality trait, but a system made up of 5 deeply connected elements. Think of them as the 5 senses of your inner world, guiding you not just through the outer chaos of life, but through the labyrinth of your own emotions. The first is self-awareness, switching on the light in a dark room so you can see where your emotions are coming from, where they're heading, and where they might be trying to drag you. Next is self-regulation, not suppressing your emotions or pretending they don't exist, but knowing when to release them, when to hold them back, and when to channel them into purposeful action. Then comes intrinsic motivation, the quiet, inner drive to keep moving, not for applause or approval, but for something deeper and more meaningful. Fourth is empathy, the ability to read the silences between words, to recognize the pain behind a smile, and to understand without the need to control. Finally, social skill, the art of connection without losing yourself, of understanding others while still honoring your own boundaries. These 5 aren't separate boxes. They work together like a single nervous system, keeping you steady and preventing you from getting lost in mood swings or social collisions. And they're not just theories to remember, they're skills to activate, maintain, and strengthen through daily practice. It all begins with one deceptively simple question. What am I feeling? Where is it coming from? Should I act or just observe? From awareness comes training. From understanding comes alignment. And from alignment comes mastery. That mastery is built on habits. Practicing silence when it protects your clarity. Pausing before reacting. Seeing people with fresh eyes instead of through the lens of old wounds. Having brutally honest conversations with yourself, not to become someone else, but to return to yourself more grounded than ever. The world doesn't need more high achievers who are emotionally unstable. It needs people who know themselves deeply calm enough not to get pulled into other people's storms, and wise enough not to meet pain with more pain. And that begins with the foundation of all, EQ, the first pillar, self-awareness. This is where all emotional mastery starts. Because if you can't clearly see what's happening inside you, you can't understand it, let alone guide it. Self-awareness is more than a skill, it's a doorway into your own inner world. And here's the power of that doorway. The moment you realize I'm angry, you're no longer just the anger itself, you're the observer. That tiny shift is the line between impulse and intention, between reaction and choice. Stoicism doesn't ask you to kill your emotions, it asks you to step outside them, to watch them rise and fall without being dragged beneath the wave. Self-awareness won't make life easier, but it will make it truer. It's the discipline of daring to face your inner storms without flinching. And in a world obsessed with speed, slowing down enough to truly feel is an act of quiet rebellion. Because if you don't know what you're feeling, you can't understand why you act the way you do. And without that understanding, you're not really in control, you're just reacting to life as it happens. The mind is like a city at rush hour, loud, crowded, and full of confusion. Emotions like anger, sadness, and anxiety show up uninvited. You can't slam the city gates and make them vanish, but you can rise above the noise, look down, and ask, who's here? Why did they come? That is emotional awareness, stepping outside yourself to see what's really going on inside. Psychologist John D. Meyer, co-creator of the concept of emotional intelligence, described several types of emotional processors. Some are like mirrors, clear and calm. They know what they feel, they know why, and they move through it without letting it define them. Others are wanderers in the fog. They feel everything but can't name anything, drifting like boats without rudders. Then there are those who know. They're angry or hurt, but do nothing. They accept emotions like prison sentences, never questioning or releasing them. And finally, there are those for whom emotions are like scrambled Morse code, present but unreadable. These people don't lack emotions, they simply can't identify or express them clearly. If you can't name what you're feeling, you can't manage it. When emotions are in the driver's seat, you lose your inner compass. It's like setting out on a long journey, but misplacing the map. You're still moving, still colliding with things, but you have no idea where you're going. And for most people, that realization comes too late after damage is already done. One of the most famous cases in medical history shows how crucial emotional regulation really is. It wasn't that the person had no emotions, it's that his ability to process and manage them may have been neurologically damaged at the core. It sounds like something from a tragic novel, but it happened in 1848. Phineas Gage, a 25-year-old railroad foreman in Vermont, was known as energetic, organized, reliable, and a natural leader. While packing explosive powder into rock, a sudden ignition blasted a metal rod over a meter long straight through his skull, entering under his left cheek and exiting through the top of his head. Incredibly, he survived conscious, speaking, and even walking within hours. Physically, he healed almost completely, but emotionally he was never the same. Those who knew him said he became impulsive, rude, impatient, and prone to outbursts. The dependable leader could no longer keep a job or maintain stable relationships. It was one of the first clues for neurologists that the brain doesn't just control speech and movement, it shapes how we see ourselves and interact with others. The damage to his prefrontal cortex likely disrupted his ability to regulate emotions, plan ahead, and moderate his behavior. Today, science has gone far beyond Gage's case, but his story sparked the idea that the brain has an emotional control center. And here's the real question for us. If one iron rod could destroy someone's ability to regulate emotions, how many invisible rods are doing the same to us without us realizing? Chronic work stress, childhood trauma, deeply ingrained behavioral patterns. These can all be psychic injuries, slowly eroding our ability to observe and guide ourselves. You might still show up for work, reply to texts, and smile in photos, but inside you've lost touch with how you feel and why. That's why cultivating self-awareness is not optional, it's survival. You can't undo the past or rebuild your brain like Gage's, but you can relearn how to listen to yourself. Each day you can sit quietly and ask, what am I feeling? Today, don't make it pretty. Make it real. When you're angry, pause and ask, what inside me just got hurt? When you're anxious, don't paste on a fake smile. Say to yourself, I'm afraid. Naming the feeling creates just enough distance to stop it from owning you. From there, you go deeper. Identify your non-negotiable core values, integrity, gratitude, honor, so you can respond in ways that align with who you are, not just how you feel in the moment. If you're brave, ask someone you trust, do I let my emotions control me? Do I hurt people without realizing it? The answers may sting, but they can shine light into parts of yourself you've never examined. Emotions, good or bad, are not enemies. They're signals. Just as physical pain tells you something's wrong in your body, anger, anxiety, and sadness are messages from within. The real question is, will you listen? Phineas Gage's door to self-awareness was shut forever by trauma, but yours is still open if you choose to walk through it. When you can name your emotions without fear or judgment, you've already taken a huge step toward mastering emotional intelligence. So, what's next? Once you see yourself clearly, once you can recognize the anger, the grief, the worry, how do you stop those feelings from sweeping you away? How do you regulate emotions with clarity instead of pretending to be strong or shutting down completely? The answer lies in emotional regulation, where knowing what you feel becomes the foundation for guiding what you do. Because one reckless text, one angry glare, one harsh sentence can destroy a relationship, a chance, or a trust you'll never get back. And here's the truth: what haunts us isn't the moment itself. It's the replay in our minds afterwards. Why did I let my emotions take control? This is why emotional regulation isn't a soft skill. It's a core survival tool. The Stoics knew this centuries ago. They didn't deny emotions. They studied them, named them, and then refused to be ruled by them. Their calm wasn't coldness. It was the signature of a trained mind. They created a small but powerful gap, a pause between what happens and how they respond. In that gap lies true strength. While others are swept away by surges of emotion, the Stoic stands like a stone pillar in the storm, unmoved, deliberate, anchored. If you've ever lashed out over something small, a careless remark, a disrespectful gesture, you felt the raw power of the amygdala, a tiny part of your brain wired for survival, ready to hit the panic button without your permission. Psychologist Daniel Goleman calls this emotional hijacking. It's like being thrown out of the driver's seat of your own life the moment emotion spikes. Logic doesn't get a vote. Primitive instinct takes the wheel. And here's the truth: this isn't about not knowing better. It's about not having the space to choose differently, but you can stay in the driver's seat. In the split second when emotion flares, you can train yourself to pause just long enough to breathe and make a better choice. This isn't fantasy. It's a skill proven by neuroscience and practiced daily by the Stoics. Even a 5-second delay can reroute signals from your emotional brain to your rational brain. One of the simplest, most underrated tools: count to 5 before you respond. In a heated argument, the person who steps outside to breathe isn't retreating. They're winning the only battle that truly matters, the battle over their own state of mind. Abraham Lincoln had his own version of this. After the Battle of Gettysburg, he wrote an unsent, blistering letter to a general who had squandered a decisive opportunity. He sealed it, marked it never sent, and walked away. That quiet decision preserved both his dignity and a critical relationship. We all have our own letters never sent, the bitter replies we don't post, the sarcastic comebacks we swallow, the messages we delete instead of send. Every time we choose silence over a reactive outburst, we protect our freedom. Another powerful tool is reframing, shifting your interpretation of an event. When someone interrupts you, instead of "they don't respect me," try "maybe they're nervous and overcompensating." The event stays the same, but your perception changes, and so does your response. Your body is also a built-in alarm system. A clenched jaw, sweaty palms, a racing pulse. These are early warnings that you're on the brink of losing control. Notice them. Name them. Then ground yourself. Feel your feet on the floor, your back against the chair, the air moving across your skin. Manage your emotional riverbed daily. Walk, meditate, breathe deeply, not to escape life, but to keep the water level low enough so you don't flood when storms hit. And when the emotion is too big to simply set aside, release it, write it, paint it, speak it to someone you trust. Suppressed emotions don't vanish. They ferment and eventually explode. This is not weakness. This is power. When others shout, you choose silence. When others panic, you observe. When others retaliate, you seek to understand. You will slip, everyone does. But every time you count to 3 instead of snapping, every time you catch stress earlier than before, you've won a small, meaningful victory. Marcus Aurelius said it best. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. No matter what chaos unfolds outside, there is one place that remains under your control, your choice in this moment. And only when you master your own emotions can you truly step into someone else's world. That's where the next stage of emotional intelligence begins. Social skills, the art of reading unspoken signals in a glance, a gesture, or the rhythm of a voice. Because true connection isn't built on perfect words, it's built on what we sense. Once we learn to understand emotions, we can finally start to understand people. Someone can be brilliant and capable, yet if they lack the ability to read and respond to subtle social cues, they risk being seen as cold, arrogant, or disconnected. The sad truth is, many don't even realize they're making others feel unheard or dismissed. Social skills aren't about fitting in or being a smooth talker. They're the deliberate practice of noticing, adjusting, and nurturing relationships rooted in awareness, humility, and empathy, all hallmarks of Stoic character. Stoicism reminds us you can't control what others say or do, but you can control your response. When someone's rude, you can match their hostility, or you can pause and ask, "You seem off today. Is something going on?" That small choice can turn tension into understanding, replacing silent battles with genuine dialogue. Effective communication isn't about saying everything on your mind, it's about being understood. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. A well-timed nod, an attentive gaze, or a simple, "I get it," can cool anger faster than a speech. On the other hand, a cold glance, awkward silence, or closed body language can derail even the best intentions. Body language is the most honest language we have. It doesn't lie. Yet many of us were never taught to read it, and in some cultures, the unspoken rules make it even harder. A Japanese colleague might smile while disagreeing with you. An adult might hide deep pain to save face. Without awareness, we misread signals and create problems that never needed to exist. I remember a colleague who nearly lost a major client over a short email. The client had written, "No need for more details." He took it as dismissive and was ready to fire off an angry reply until he called and discovered the client was sick and just wanted to wrap things up quickly. A simple pause to ask, "What might I be missing here?" could save countless relationships. Over 50% of communication impact comes from body language. You can say, "I'm fine," but if your shoulders are slumped and your eyes are downcast, the truth is written all over you. Stoics train themselves to observe, not just with their ears, but with their eyes. They see the worry behind a smile, the hesitation in a voice. And it's not just about reading the room, it's about changing it. You can walk into a tense meeting, see the folded arms and tight faces, and choose to soften the mood with a warm greeting or a light comment. That's social skill in action. I once met a hospital receptionist right before her lunch break. I expected a rushed, curt exchange. Instead, she looked at me, smiled gently, and said, "You look like you're in a hurry. Let me help you now, so you don't have to wait." Read my need before I even spoke. That's mastery. In conflict, social skills are tested the hardest. Imagine arguing with someone close, voices rising, then you lower your tone and say, "I'm not trying to fight. I want to understand what's making you feel this way." That's not manipulation. It's a Stoic choice to prioritize understanding over winning. Even in friendships, small habits matter. One person consistently arriving late or dominating the conversation may slowly find themselves excluded without ever being told why. Honest feedback, delivered with care, can save that bond. Instead of snapping, "You're always late," you might say, "We love having you here, which is why it matters when you're on time. Can we find a start time that works better for you?" That's not just criticism, it's connection. And connection, as the Stoics knew, is built moment by moment in the way we choose to show up for others. Most importantly, empathy doesn't mean agreeing with everything someone says. It means staying present long enough for them to feel truly seen. When a coworker takes credit for your work, a knee-jerk reaction might be to lash out or withdraw. But social skill combined with empathy finds the middle path. You might say, "I noticed your name came up a few times without mine. Did you catch that too? Maybe we can agree on a way to share credit so everyone's recognized." Gentle, clear, and aimed at resolution rather than revenge. That's the essence of socially intelligent conflict. Not avoiding it, but handling it with respect and purpose. Strong relationships aren't defined by the absence of arguments, but by the ability to argue without damage, without leaving wounds that fester. A real friend is not the one who nods at your every word. It's the one who can tell you you're wrong and still be there when you're at your most vulnerable. But to have those relationships, you must first be that kind of person. That means having the courage to give and receive feedback without ego. When I once told a friend he had a habit of cutting people off mid-sentence, his first reaction was anger. But a few days later, he thanked me, because no one had ever cared enough to tell him before. People with strong social skills regularly examine how they come across, and they adapt with humility. If you asked me, how do I develop great social skills? I wouldn't start with books or workshops. I'd say, truly listen, observe carefully, be willing to adapt without defensiveness. Treat every conversation as practice, every relationship as a training ground for becoming sharper and kinder. Because when you can read people, resolve conflict gently, offer feedback with care, and build intentional connections, your social skills stop being a tool for networking and become the foundation of a richer, deeper life. And that leads to the next level. Empathy, not just understanding what's said, but feeling what's left unsaid. There are moments so brief they're never mentioned, and yet they etch deep. Marks in our emotional memory. A glance without judgment, a touch without expectation, a presence that stays without pressure. We often think we need the perfect words to ease someone's pain, but often, what they need is simply someone calm enough to stay, not to erase the pain, not to fill the silence, but to remain until they know you're still here. Empathy is More than knowing someone is hurting, it's understanding why and choosing to meet them there without judgment or agenda. Neuroscience identifies 3 levels of empathy. Cognitive empathy, grasping the logic and reasons behind someone's feelings. Emotional empathy, physically and emotionally mirroring their state. Compassionate empathy, letting understanding and feeling lead to action that eases suffering. The Stoics, for all their emphasis on reason, never rejected empathy. They simply refused to let it overwhelm judgment. For them, empathy wasn't softness, it was awareness, knowing when to stay silent, when to step forward, and when to hold the line. So why do we fail at it so often? The answer lies in our own biology. The amygdala, the primitive emotion center, fires instantly, triggering fight, flight, or freeze before the rational brain has time to step in. That's why so many conflicts aren't born from reality, but from reflex. Without awareness, we end up reacting to ghosts of threat rather than what's actually in front of us. Empathy is, in many ways, a rebellion against our default wiring. Our instincts tell us to judge quickly, defend ourselves, and label others based on the smallest sliver of information. When someone comes across as cold or distant, it's effortless to write them off as heartless. But empathy asks for something harder: a pause, a deliberate slowing down of the reflexive emotional surge to make space for another possibility. Maybe they're exhausted. Maybe today has been a battle you can't see. Maybe silence is the only way they know to keep themselves from breaking. Even if your guesses aren't correct, the simple act of trying to step into another person's reality builds a bridge, one that leads you out of your own assumptions and into the possibility of understanding. Neurology gives us a stark illustration of what life without empathy looks like. Patients with damaged amygdalas often retain the ability to reason and understand context. They can tell you why a situation might be sad or joyful, but they don't feel it. They recount tragedy like they're reading the weather report, precise, accurate, but hollow. Conversations with them are efficient but eerily empty because the emotional thread that weaves connection is missing. That's the crucial insight. Empathy isn't just a skill, it's a conscious decision, and it's inseparable from emotional intelligence. Without it, social skill becomes mechanical. With it, connection becomes meaningful. Choosing empathy means choosing to listen without interrupting, without racing to fix, and without hijacking someone's story with your own. It means choosing to stay curious instead of certain. Why does this person think this way? What wound or experience might be shaping their reaction? And it means choosing to regulate your own emotional reflexes so you don't default to the patterns wired into our species. Since the hunter-gatherer age, psychology even shows how small, intentional actions can make a difference. In one study, simply naming the emotion on someone's face reduced amygdala activity and strengthened the connection to the brain's rational centers. Saying, "You look sad," instead of "stop being so negative," can pull someone back into self-awareness without offering a single piece of advice. There's no shortcut for empathy, but there are practical starting points. When someone shares, resist replying with your own story. They need your attention, not your narrative. When someone is angry, look beneath the surface. Anger often hides fear or pain. When someone acts in a way you can't understand, ask yourself, if I had lived their life, would I be any different? Don't wait until a partner goes silent, a friend drifts away, or a child says, "You don't." Understand me. Empathy isn't an accessory to life, it's the foundation. Without it, trust, love, collaboration, and forgiveness crumble. You will misstep. You will react too quickly. You may lose someone because you failed to see their silent cry for help. But empathy is forged in attention, moment by moment. It is the choice that defines whether people see you as clever or as trustworthy. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress feeling. It asks you to place emotion where it belongs. When you understand the cause of another's pain, you no longer need rules to guide your ethics. You act with integrity because you see clearly. And if you've ever doubted yourself, felt you weren't sensitive enough, deep enough, or attentive enough, know this: you can start again. Like any mental strength, empathy grows from the courage to observe yourself first, before trying to understand anyone else. But staying grounded in that practice requires a different kind of power, an inner fire that keeps burning, even when you're misunderstood, hurt, or let down. Because no one can truly show up for others if they are running on empty. No one can stay present if they're desperate to escape themselves. And no one can build something lasting without the ability to keep moving when no one is watching. This is the fifth and final pillar of emotional intelligence, self-motivation. Not the fleeting rush from a motivational video or a playlist at the gym, but the steady, quiet burn the Stoics called inner strength. The ability to live in alignment with your values even when the world isn't applauding, when there is no reward in sight, no certainty of outcome, and no audience to cheer you on. Self-motivation begins in the hardest place, the empty spaces of life, a quiet room, an early morning without urgency, a long afternoon you can either waste or make count. This is where most people falter, not because they lack talent or resources, but because they've lived too long by other people's expectations. They don't know what truly matters to them. They can't tell if they're working out of passion or from fear of being left behind. They don't know if their drive comes from wanting to create or simply wanting to avoid failure. And when the applause stops, so do they. Every goal fades. Every promise to themselves feels hollow. The Stoics refused to live like that. They acted not to be seen, but to remain true to the good within them. They didn't need a crowd to validate their path because they had already chosen it for themselves. The Stoics didn't remain unshaken because they were superhuman. They endured because they didn't depend on the world to validate their integrity. They didn't require applause to act rightly. They needed no trophies, no recognition, no audience. Marcus Aurelius captured this truth in a single sentence. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. He didn't rise to win. He didn't rise to impress. He rose because that's what it means to live as a human being, present, purposeful, and willing to face the day as it comes. No motivational fluff, no grand performance, just truth. So how do you build that kind of unshakable strength? How do you keep moving forward when your heart feels empty and your mind feels numb? Start with this: you don't have to like something to do it well. One of the most damaging myths of our time is, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. The reality? Do what is meaningful and you'll have a reason to endure through days you love and through days you hate. True motivation doesn't come from chasing feelings. It comes from clarity. A painter doesn't only paint when inspired, he paints because creating keeps him whole. A father doesn't rise early because he's excited. He does it because his child needs him. A warrior doesn't draw his sword because he wants to fight. He draws it because if he doesn't, something worth protecting will be lost. Ask yourself, what matters so much to me that I would do it even when I feel nothing? Think about the days you did nothing, didn't work, didn't learn, didn't create, just scrolled endlessly. How did those nights feel? Proud, peaceful? Or was there that quiet ache of regret, not loud enough to make you cry, but deep enough to steal your rest? Every time you procrastinate, you're not just avoiding a task, you're slowly eroding your self-respect. Every time you choose comfort over effort, you teach your mind a dangerous lesson. I am not strong enough to lead my own life. Repeat that often enough, and you'll believe it. And here's the irony. You don't act because you feel motivated because you acted. Waiting for inspiration is a slow death. One small step creates momentum. Momentum builds confidence, and confidence silences doubt. Think of motivation like an oil lamp. You don't need to fill the whole tank to light it. You only need a single drop, a spark, and the will to protect the flame. So, let's talk practical habits. Pick your first win. Do one important task early in the day. The momentum will carry you forward. Write down your why without sugarcoating. If your why is to prove I'm not worthless, then write it. Honesty is fuel. Change your environment. Cluttered space, cluttered mind. Surround yourself with people and spaces that lift your standards. Create a ritual, a small repeated action. That signals to your mind, it's time to begin. Rest with honesty. Is this rest or avoidance? One recovers you, the other robs you. You don't need to conquer the world, you just need to win against yourself, choice by choice, morning by morning, moment by moment. Those small wins build a person you can believe in. So I'll leave you with this question. Today, did you act on what you believe in, or did you just react to what happened? If your answer makes you uncomfortable, that's not failure, that's the start. It means you're waking up, because learning to motivate yourself isn't just another self-improvement hack. It's the foundation of your character. And from that foundation comes the ability to express yourself, not to dominate others, but to build genuine connection. We live in a world where we are constantly connected, yet rarely understood. We speak more, type faster, reply instantly, but we listen less. A careless word can leave a wound that lingers for years. A dismissive glance can ignite quiet resentment that never gets spoken. In a world where speed is valued over depth, emotional intelligence is no longer optional, it's survival. It's the difference between relationships that last and those that fracture. It's the skill that turns ordinary conversations into moments of genuine understanding. And it's here where awareness, self-control, empathy, and self-motivation converge that the next chapter begins. Learning to communicate in a way that builds trust instead of breaking it, that bridges gaps instead of widening them. In Stoicism, self-mastery has never meant becoming cold or rigid. It's about making space for your full humanity while staying rooted in your values. And nothing tests this more than real-life interactions, those messy, unpredictable moments where pride, frustration, and vulnerability all crash together. Take a familiar scene, being insulted in public. Olivia, a sales rep, has just wrapped up a presentation. Before she can breathe, her colleague Mark cracks a jab in front of the team. I guess Olivia plans to sell this with a smile instead of stats. Laughter ripples through the room. Her chest tightens. Heat rises in her face. In that instant, she feels a cocktail of shame, anger, and helplessness. She has options: snap back with something sharper, storm out, or stew silently. But instead, she simply looks at Mark, smiles, and says, "Thanks for the reminder, Mark. Next time I'll bring the data. I hope you'll still be smiling then." Silence. Mark doesn't try it again. This wasn't luck. It was self-awareness in action. Olivia understood something crucial. Mark's words couldn't rewrite her worth unless she gave them permission. She didn't need to flex her wit or match his aggression to protect her dignity. In Stoic terms, that's virtue living from your values, not from the crowd's reactions. Because here's the truth. Others can insult you, but they can't take your character unless you hand it over. Another all too common example. A fight with someone you love. John comes home after a draining day, hoping for a moment of peace. Instead, he sees a messy kitchen, no dinner, and Emily, his girlfriend of 3 years, scrolling on the couch. Frustration flashes. Without thinking, he blurts, "What have you been doing all day?" "I'm exhausted too." Emily shoots back, "You think I've been relaxing? I know you came home late just to avoid chores." What started as unspoken need spirals into open war underneath the fight. They both wanted the same thing, a bit of comfort, a little understanding. If John had paused just for one breath, he might have asked, "Where is this anger really coming from? Is it the mess, or the feeling of being unseen?" That one question could have shifted everything. Instead of lashing out, he could have said, "I was hoping for some peace tonight. But maybe you had a rough day too." A small change in words, and Emily might have softened instead of bristling. That's the power of emotional intelligence. It's not just a nice spill. It's the difference between turning fragile moments into fractures or into deeper connection. Then there's the challenge of being falsely accused. Daniel, an international student, was blamed by his project group for not doing his share. But he knows he did his work, just didn't upload properly. Anger and betrayal bubble up. He wants to send a blistering email to clear his name. Instead, he remembers Epictetus's wisdom. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. So he sends a brief, factual message to the professor, attaching his work as proof. No drama, no blame. The professor understands. The group falls silent, and Daniel walks away with something more valuable than a grade his piece. So, how do you put emotional intelligence into practice in your messy moments? Forget the endless self-help checklists. You only need 3 steps. Pause. Create space between stimulus and response. That space is where clarity lives. Name the emotion. Admit, "I feel hurt," or "I feel afraid." Simply naming it loosens its grip. Act with intention. Choose a response that serves your values, not your ego. Ask yourself in every interaction, what's my real goal here? To win the argument or to keep the relationship? Sometimes the wisest move in a fight is not a witty comeback, but a deep breath. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to leave the last word unsaid, to let go of the need to be understood right now. The truth is, conversations don't usually collapse because we don't know what to say. They collapse because pride stops us from saying what actually needs to be said, especially, "I was out of line." In Stoic thought, dignity isn't about being right all the time. It's about being humble enough not to need to be right all the time. It's knowing when to stop, even if you could win. That kind of restraint earns more respect than any mic drop moment ever will. In the end, communication isn't about showing off, it's about showing up. The best communicators aren't the ones who dominate the room. They're the ones who understand themselves, read others well, and choose their words like they matter. Because they do. And if you think emotional intelligence is only something you need for relationships or family life, you're overlooking its toughest battlefield, the workplace. This is where you deal with people you don't choose, where you sit through meetings with colleagues you can't fully trust, where you smile politely at a client while your insides are screaming. It's not a theory here, it's survival. And more than survival, it's strategy. The workplace is the ultimate test of whether you can hold your ground, lead with wisdom, and keep your dignity without losing your edge. In modern offices, whether that's a corporate high-rise or a remote Zoom grid, emotions are often treated as unwelcome guests. Conference rooms lit by sterile LEDs, endless spreadsheets, and stiff handshakes all seem to send the same message. Feelings have no seat at this table. But here's the truth: emotions are always in the room. They simmer under deadlines, ripple through team dynamics, and influence every unspoken hesitation. The real difference between thriving and burning out isn't whether emotions exist, it's who recognizes them first and knows what to do with them. That's why emotional intelligence, often dismissed in favor of IQ or hard skills, is the quiet engine that keeps teams functional, leaders respected, and organizations alive. A leader with high EQ won't let their personal frustration derail a meeting. They won't make major calls when their judgment is clouded. They'll sense tension before it explodes, and they'll create space for others to be heard, not because it's written in a manual, but because they know it strengthens trust. This isn't softness, it's precision. It's the discipline of directing emotion instead of letting it direct you. Take feedback as an example. A manager who says you're messing everything up might think they're being straightforward, but all they've done is shut the person down. Change the language to, "You did this part well. Here's where we can improve, and I believe you can do it." And suddenly the feedback isn't just criticism. It's a bridge to better performance. That's why companies serious about growth are putting EQ at the center of hiring. Skills can be taught. EQ shows in how you handle pressure, respond to feedback, and resolve conflict before it festers. A brilliant engineer might write flawless code, but if they can't communicate their ideas, manage disagreements, or read the room, their brilliance becomes a bottleneck. And when every team member operates in their own emotional silo, the organization doesn't grow, it fractures. This gap becomes clearest under stress-heated meetings, subtle rivalries, deadlines that turn colleagues into competitors. Low EQ reacts with defensiveness, blame, or withdrawal. High EQ pauses, observes, and shifts the question from who's to blame to what's really happening here. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about owning it, guiding it, and using it as a tool for connection rather than control. And EQ isn't just for leaders. The newest intern can bring it into the room. The teammate who notices when someone's unusually quiet and checks in. The colleague who chooses calm when others are tense. These quiet acts, repeated over time, transform a workplace from just tolerable into a place people actually want to stay. But here's what EQ is not: a weekend workshop or a neat checklist. In HR's training program, emotions don't run on bullet points, they run in the day-to-day moments. How you show up after a failed pitch. How you handle a misunderstanding without weaponizing blame. How you stay open even when feedback stings. It's not about being less emotional. It's about being more aware of your emotions and choosing your response with intention. Think about that one person in your office whose presence steadies the whole room. They may not be the loudest, most charismatic, or most official leader, but somehow, when they're there, people breathe easier. That's EQ. They hold space, tell the truth without tearing down, and remain firm without becoming unyielding. And in diverse teams, diverse in background, beliefs, age, and identity, EQ isn't just valuable, it's essential. Because diversity alone doesn't create inclusion. Inclusion takes work. It requires recognizing your own biases before they color your actions, and calling out subtle harm not to shame, but to stop it from spreading. You can't control the reflexes you were conditioned to have, but you can control the impact you leave behind. Zoom out even further, and you'll see something bigger. Group emotional intelligence. The strongest teams don't just share goals, they share trust. They disagree without tearing each other apart. They speak up without fear. They resolve tension before it hardens into resentment. In those teams, EQ isn't a side feature, it's the operating system. And if you want to start building that right now, forget theory. In your very next meeting, pay attention not just to what's being said, but to how people feel when they say it. That's where the real work begins. When someone disagrees with you, notice your first instinct. When you feel overlooked, resist the urge to immediately defend yourself. These aren't just random moments, they're the training ground. Every time you choose understanding over reaction, clarity over ego, you're strengthening the one thing no one else can touch, outsource, or automate: your own inner discipline. Your career will never be defined solely by results. It will be shaped by relationships. Not only by what you accomplish, but by how people feel working alongside you. They won't always remember the specifics of your words, but they will remember the steady sense of calm you brought when things turned chaotic simply because you stayed calm. And here's the thing: emotional intelligence doesn't clock out when the workday ends. It follows you home. It walks with you into your kitchen, into late-night conversations with your partner, into the quiet moments when your kids need more than advice. They need your presence. If you think managing your emotions at work is difficult, try it at home, where the stakes are higher, the masks are thinner, and love can cut deeper than any corporate meeting. That's where the real test begins. The living room not the boardroom, is where emotional mastery is forged. Picture this. It's late, you're drained. You walk through the door, shoulders tight, head buzzing with unresolved thoughts. Your partner says something harmless, or at least they think it's harmless, but you hear it as criticism. Your chest tightens, your pulse spikes. Before you know it, you've snapped. You always do this. A spark turns into a wildfire. That was the moment a choice could have been made, the choice to pause, notice the surge of emotion, and respond with self-control rather than wounded pride. People with high EQ don't avoid anger. They stand steady within it. They treat emotions as data, not commands. In a marriage, EQ is the bridge between two inner worlds. It's the pause that allows a conversation to continue instead of collapse. Sometimes it's as simple as asking, "How are you feeling right now?" Or reaching out to hold a hand after an argument to silently say, "We may disagree, but we're still on the same team." One practical tool: create a pause signal with your partner. If either of you feels overwhelmed, you can call for a 10-minute break, not to walk away in anger, but to step back, breathe, and return with clarity. Many relationships don't need more advice. They just need the right pause at the right time. And EQ doesn't stop with romance. Friendships thrive or wither on the same principles. We forget that even our closest friends have unspoken needs and wounds. How many friendships have faded, not because of betrayal, but because of small misunderstandings left to grow? Maybe they didn't reply to a message, and you assumed they didn't care. But what if they were silently waiting for you to ask, "Hey, are you doing okay?" Try this. Instead of asking, "Why have you been so quiet?" which sounds like judgment, say, "I miss our long talks. Are you okay?" That's the shift from demand to care, from interrogation to connection. And then there's parenting, the longest game of emotional intelligence you'll ever play. Children learn far more from how we act than from what we tell them. If we explode at their mistakes, we teach them that anger is the correct response to imperfection. If instead we kneel down, look them in the eyes, and say, "I see you're upset about losing your toy. Is that right?" We're giving them the vocabulary to name what they feel. And naming an emotion is the first step to mastering it. Kids don't need perfect parents. They need parents who can apologize. Saying, "I was tired, but that's no excuse for raising my voice. I'm sorry," teaches more about integrity than 100 lectures. Avoiding accountability, on the other hand, teaches them to hide mistakes and shift blame, make emotions part of daily language. Instead of the usual, "Did you have fun at school?" try asking, "Was there a moment today that made you feel frustrated or proud?" These questions invite them into a deeper conversation about their inner world. Without pressure. High EQ doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means steering them. Anger isn't the enemy. Letting anger drive the wheel is. And one of the hard truths is that we often treat the people we love the worst, not because they deserve it, but because we assume they'll forgive us. That safety can make us careless. But familiarity isn't a license for disrespect. It's a call to be more mindful, more deliberate, more gentle. Here's a mirror question worth keeping. If I truly love this person, why am I speaking in a way that makes them shrink? The answer will often tell you more about yourself than about them. The moments when you want to give up, when you're exhausted, when your pride is aching, are the moments that most demand courage. Because EQ isn't about how you feel. It's about how you interpret what you feel. When your child throws a tantrum in public, the shame isn't from the noise, it's from the story you tell yourself. Everyone thinks I'm a bad parent. When your partner forgets your birthday, the sting isn't in the forgetting, it's in the belief. They don't care anymore. Events are neutral. It's the story we attach to them that fuels the emotion. To sharpen that awareness, try this exercise. Write down what happened. Write down how you felt. Write down the story you told yourself. Then, rewrite that story in a softer, more neutral way. This isn't about toxic positivity. It's about loosening the grip of your first interpretation so you can act with clarity instead of reflex. And here's the deeper truth. How you speak to your partner, friends, and children today is shaping how they'll speak to themselves tomorrow. Whether you pass down emotional fluency or emotional wounds is determined by these small, everyday moments, the 3-second pause before lashing out, the choice to listen instead of interrupt, the willingness to sit beside someone in silence and simply say, "I'm here." Emotional intelligence is not a trick for controlling others. It's the courage to choose kindness, even when every part of you wants to do the opposite. And if one day you slip, if you lash out, lose your cool, or wound someone you care about, don't treat it as proof you failed. That too is part of the path. Emotional intelligence is not a finish line where you stand uncheckable. It's a lifelong journey, shaped by every mistake you choose to learn from. You don't need perfection. You only need the will to keep moving toward kindness, one step, one choice, one conversation at a time. When you build EQ at home without an audience, without applause, in the raw vulnerability of real relationships, you're laying a foundation that no one can see, but everyone can feel. That quiet inner structure follows you everywhere. It keeps you steady, not because you're trying to project strength, but because you've made peace with who you are. From that peace, real confidence emerges. Not the loud, performative kind that needs to be noticed, but the grounded kind that speaks without words felt, in the way you walk into a room, listen to a story, or handle pressure. Here's a hard truth. Most of us don't lack communication skills. We just lack the courage to use them. It's not that you don't know how to speak, it's that you're afraid your honesty will be judged. Afraid that if you show up as your real self, someone will reject you. A lack of confidence is rarely about skill. It's usually a wound in your sense of worth. And Stoicism, if you practice it fully, is an unflinching remedy. Stoics don't chase confidence. They strip away everything that buries it. Like sunlight behind a curtain, your self-worth is already there. You don't need to find it, you just need to remove the coverings, other people's opinions, past embarrassments, the constant need for validation. Confidence isn't something you acquire, it's what's left when you stop outsourcing your value to the reactions of others. Picture this. You walk into a room where everyone is talking and laughing. That small voice in your head starts whispering, "What should I say so I don't sound stupid? How do I impress them without trying too hard?" That voice isn't you. It's your survival instinct, hardwired to seek social safety. So you retreat. You pretend to check your phone. You stay silent. And yet, Deep down, all you really wanted was to connect. Emotional intelligence doesn't start with charm. It starts with the courage to stay present in that discomfort without letting it control you. Stoicism doesn't teach you how to make people like you. It teaches you how to stand firm when your craving for approval kicks in. Imagine you're wearing an invisible name tag every social interaction. On it is the question, am I enough? Every word, gesture, and glance you give is secretly trying to answer that. A Stoic doesn't rip the name tag off. They simply realize it never belonged to them in the first place. Epictetus said, "Attach yourself to what is spiritually superior, regardless of what other people think or do." In practice, this means you can get interrupted in a meeting, tell a joke that no one laughs at, get ghosted after a date, and still remain centered. Because your worth is not up for auction in the marketplace of other people's opinions. Sounds empowering, but how do you actually live it? Here's one way. Before a big conversation, job interview, presentation, or party, write down 3 things you can't control people's gazes. Their reactions. The outcome. Then write 1 thing you can control: how you show up. When you focus on that 1 thing, you take back ownership of your energy. And once you do, confidence stops being a performance and becomes your default state. Then write down 3 things you can control: your attitude, the clarity of your words, and your ability to truly listen. Just recognizing what's yours too. Carry cuts the weight in half. Real confidence isn't born from the mantra, "I'm good enough." It's built from the conviction, I can live with being imperfect. High emotional intelligence isn't about winning every conversation. It's about being able to walk away from awkward moments without carrying them like stones in your pocket. Think about it. How many times have you replayed a date, a meeting, or a casual chat in your head, cringing over something you said? Why did I say that? I sounded so stupid. That's when you need Stoicism the most, not to beat yourself up, but to reassess and keep moving. You don't need to dominate the room. You just need to own your reaction when the room doesn't go your way. When someone looks at you coldly or a group tunes you out, you have the right not to spiral into self-doubt. You don't know their story. You don't need to. Your job is to stay present with what you have to share. Speak because it matters to you, not because you want applause. Don't waste your energy trying to build social confidence through tricks, scripted gestures, or manipulating body language. Build it from the ground up. Ask yourself, do I believe what I have to say is worth hearing? If the answer is no, don't force it. Read more, live more deeply, think more clearly. Confidence doesn't come from mimicking Steve Jobs' speaking style. It comes from having something real, earned, and grounded to share. And if you feel you don't yet have much to say, that's okay too. Silence, when it comes from self-assurance and not fear, is a form of confidence. You have the right to simply listen, observe, and smile without feeling the need to chime in just to be noticed. True confidence doesn't chase attention. It's unshaken by being overlooked. Here's a simple image. You are a glass of water. If the glass is empty, you'll crave being filled by attention, praise, validation. But if it's already full, you approach others to share, not to be topped up. Stoicism is the art of filling your own glass from within. How do you fill it? With discipline. Here's one of the most powerful exercises. After every social interaction that leaves you unsettled, write down 3 things. what made me uncomfortable, how I responded, and how I'd like to respond next time. Not to judge yourself, but to guide yourself. Over time, you'll notice you don't try to be confident. It just becomes who you are. Can you enter a conversation without trying to prove anything? Can you face being ignored, rejected, or misunderstood and still believe in your worth? If so, you're not just learning a social skill, you're living a philosophy. You're living like a Stoic, but life will still test you. There will be moments when you feel like you can't hold it together, when the world pushes back, emotions spiral, and your inner world feels like it's caving in. Most personal crises don't start with a dramatic event. They start small, a careless remark, a wrong assumption, a misunderstanding, and if left unchecked, those small cracks can grow into deep fractures. That's why the next lesson matters so much. Handling personal crisis with emotional intelligence, where Stoicism stops being theory and becomes the thread that holds you together when everything else seems to be falling apart. Sometimes the weight you carry isn't from a single blow, it's from the slow, relentless pressure of life. Waking up heavy-hearted even on sunny days, watching unread messages pile up, moving from meeting to meeting with no time to breathe. Like you're sprinting toward a finish line you can't even see. In those moments, it's not the giant storms that break you, it's the constant tremors. And modern society tells you to be quick, adaptable, and endlessly strong. But it rarely teaches you how to stay grounded through those quiet, repeated shocks. The answer won't come from a glossy self-help slogan. It's in the ancient practicality of Stoic philosophy, wisdom that might seem dusty at first glance, but becomes a lifeline when you're in the thick of it. The Stoics understood emotional intelligence centuries before it had a name. They spoke of mastering the mind, observing emotions without letting them rule, and protecting your integrity even when the world is chaos. And it's not abstract. It's not just theory. It's survival played out in the small, everyday moments. Let's start where many people first feel the strain. Your job. You're sitting at your desk. The deadline is closing in. Your chest is tight from the fallout of a tense meeting, and your hands are trembling over the keyboard. Most people panic, spiral, rush, or freeze. But someone with emotional intelligence pauses, not to deny their anxiety, but to name it. I'm anxious. I'm afraid. That single act labeling the emotion creates a thin but critical space between you and the feeling, and in that space you can breathe. You can rein in your thoughts like calming a wild horse. You break the overwhelming task into smaller steps. Send the email, finish the slide, review the numbers. Each action is a foothold out of the quicksand, because work stress, however intense, is still surface level. The real earthquakes come from within: family breakdowns, the death of someone you love, betrayal, financial collapse. The kind of blows that don't just slow you down, they change you. What makes this kind of pain dangerous isn't its intensity, it's the persistence. It's the slow, invisible erosion that happens when you carry it in silence, because you don't want to look weak. It's the way you lash out or withdraw, not because you don't care, but because you don't know how to say, I'm hurt. This is where emotional intelligence becomes more than a buzzword. It becomes the discipline of sitting with yourself, not to drown in self-pity, but to observe with honesty. You write down what you feel. You admit when you're lost. And then you ask a grounding question. What is still within my control? Maybe it's how you prepare your next meal. Maybe it's the tone you use when you speak to your child. Maybe it's the choice to politely decline a gathering you don't have the energy for. These small decisions aren't trivial. They're quiet declarations. I'm still here. I'm still choosing. Here's the truth we often overlook. Emotional recovery doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from walking through it fully present, without letting it dictate your every move. When you allow yourself to feel without being enslaved by those feelings, you begin to forge an armor that is both flexible and unbreakable. And yet, sometimes the exhaustion isn't emotional, it's physical. Have you ever felt so deeply drained that you didn't want to do anything? Not from laziness, but from a bone-deep depletion? Burnout rarely comes from one bad week. It's the result of carrying more than you should for far too long, without rest, without boundaries. Ironically, it's often the most capable, dependable people who burn out the hardest because they're the ones who always believe they can handle more, but the body always keeps score. First, it whispers through restless sleep, mindless eating, irritability over small things. Ignore it, and it will scream through illness, chronic pain, or a breakdown you didn't see coming. The antidote isn't a luxury vacation you can't sustain or a weekend spa trip that vanishes the moment Monday arrives. It's in the everyday art of boundary setting with your work, with your phone, with people who keep taking without giving back. It's learning to say no without guilt. It's silencing notifications, taking walks alone, and sitting still with a cup of tea without needing to check the clock. You might think, what good can something so small do? But ask yourself, when was the last time you were truly alone and felt calm instead of restless? Chronic stress doesn't just fray the mind, it corrodes the body. We don't need medical studies to tell us this, though they exist, linking it to heart disease, digestive disorders, and even cancer. We feel it in the headaches, the shallow breathing, the way we snap at people we love. When you don't regulate your emotions, you start grasping for control in destructive ways. Overeating, overdrinking, overscrolling. But you can choose healthier. Rituals, they don't have to be complicated. 10 deep breaths before responding. A 15-minute walk each morning. Writing down 3 things you're grateful for each night. These simple daily actions are like quietly laying bricks. You won't notice the wall rising at first, but one day you'll look up and realize you've built something strong enough to hold you when everything else collapses. Ask yourself, am I living in a way that makes me stronger or just surviving so I don't fall apart? The difference is subtle but critical. Those who are building strength practice resilience daily before the crisis comes. Those who are merely surviving brace themselves for the next blow, hoping it doesn't hit too hard. The Stoics never waited for disaster to practice self-control. Every difficult conversation, every sting of disappointment, every unexpected challenge, they treated these as training sessions. That's where emotional intelligence stops being an idea and becomes a way of life. It's not about knowing your emotions. It's about how you respond when the walls are closing in. It's about choosing not to snap at someone just because you're tired. It's about noticing the warning signs of burnout and having the courage to say, I need to stop. And this isn't just Stoic philosophy, it echoes in the oldest wisdom texts. From people who crossed deserts barefoot and lived on little more than belief. We rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, and character produces hope. That's not a pretty quote for a coffee mug. It's a survival blueprint for a brutal world. Yes, you will hurt. You will fall. But if you stay with the pain, if you stop running from it, you will build endurance. From that endurance, your character will deepen. And from that character, something rare will grow hope. If you've read this far, you already know EQ isn't a distant concept. It's how you protect your soul in a world that never stops shifting beneath your feet. And our journey isn't finished, because while some wounds come from stress, others are carved by the quiet, lasting marks of trauma. That's where emotional intelligence becomes not just a coping tool, but a force for healing. Some wounds are carried for decades unseen, unspoken, but heavy. I have a friend in his 30s who once admitted over drinks, "Every time someone goes quiet on me, I feel like I'm about to be abandoned." He eventually traced it back to childhood, when his mother would punish him with silence, not yelling, not hitting, just days of cold, heavy quiet. That silence taught him to fear being forgotten, to believe that love could disappear without warning. Now, even though no one punishes him that way anymore, when his partner takes a little too long to reply to a text, he spirals. It's not jealousy, it's his past waking up, quietly but forcefully. That's the thing about emotional wounds, they don't always roar. Sometimes they whisper. They're built in repetition, a look of disdain, a time you cried, and no one noticed, hearing you're too sensitive, often enough that you started believing it. And one day you stopped crying. You stopped speaking up. You stopped needing anyone. But that's not strength. That's numbness. And numbness is often the clearest sign of an old wound that never healed. What's strange about deep emotional wounds is that many people believe they've moved on. But more often than not, they've simply switched off the feeling, like throwing a blanket over a leaking puddle. You can't see the water anymore, but it's still there, slowly spreading. And over time, it seeps into the foundation, warping your mind, shaping your relationships, and even changing how you treat yourself. At that point, emotional intelligence isn't a luxury or a self-improvement hobby. It's survival. It's the moment you finally sit down, face what's been quietly burning inside for years, and say to yourself, "I'm not abandoning me anymore." The first step isn't fixing the wound, it's admitting there is one. A woman in one of my workshops once shared how she would snap at her young son every time he cried, not because he had done anything wrong, but because the sound of crying was unbearable to her. One day during a class exercise, she broke down and told us why. As a child, she was locked in a room whenever she cried. Her mother's words still echoed decades later. "Crying doesn't solve anything. Come out when you've stopped." From that day forward, she learned to hate emotions, both in herself and others. She didn't need a 12-step therapy plan to begin healing. What she needed first was the courage to see what was driving her behavior. This is why naming your emotions matters. Not vague statements like "I'm tired" or "I'm sad," but the truth beneath the surface. I feel abandoned. I feel small. I feel like I'm disappearing. Naming the emotion is like switching on a light in a dark room. And light, however, faint, is always the start of healing. One of my friends writes short letters to his 10-year-old self. Nothing poetic, just raw honesty. I know you felt like no one had your back, but I'm here now. The first time he did it, he sat staring out the window and cried. Because it was the first time in his life, he didn't run from his own feelings. The next step is building a safe space where emotions can exist without being judged. Maybe you don't have anyone right now who can hold that space for you, but you can create it. For some, it's meditation. For others, it's cooking, drawing, walking in the park at sunrise. I know someone who sketches their emotions every day. The drawings aren't art, they're messy, raw, and alive. That's the point. Another powerful exercise is rehearsing old situations with new responses. Let's say you always freeze when your boss yells. In your mind, replay the scene, but this time, instead of shrinking or fighting back, you breathe. You stay present. You let the wave pass. Do it often enough, and your brain starts associating the memory with calm control instead of fear. That's not denial, it's rewiring. Psychologist Carl Jung called this work facing the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected or labeled as weakness. We think we've buried them, but they still show up in unconscious ways. Overreacting to criticism because you were micromanaged in the past. Dismissing someone else's vulnerability because you were never allowed to be soft. And here's the danger. We begin mistaking these defense mechanisms for our identity. I'm just logical, we say, but really our emotions were mocked into silence. I'm independent, we claim, when deep down it's just the fear of being abandoned again. Letting the shadow drive without awareness turns it from a faint outline into a dark room you live in so long you start calling it light. That's when emotions freeze. You stop feeling love. You stop feeling anger. You stop wanting anything at all. You can't tell the difference between genuine sadness and echoes of old wounds. Maybe you've met people like this. They smile politely, but the smile never reaches their eyes. They call themselves strong, but what they really are is numb. They don't love. They don't hate. They just function. Real strength is not being unshaken. It's facing the pain without running. It's choosing the response that makes. You respect yourself, not the one that causes deeper wounds. Seneca put it bluntly. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. That doesn't dismiss our emotions. It's a reminder that if our feelings can be shaped by imagination, they can also be reshaped into gentler, wiser, and more healing forms when you're steady enough not to be swept away by the ghosts of your past. The present becomes clearer. You realize that not every cold person will leave you. Not every disagreement will end in heartbreak. You begin connecting again, not because you're afraid to lose someone, but because you genuinely want to be there. Healing is not a destination. It's a daily choice. It's standing still long enough to face what hurts and refusing to let it decide who you are. And when you've walked far enough down that path, you discover something unexpected. You don't just live well with yourself, you start to lead the relationships around you. That's when we move to the next chapter. Advanced social strategies. Not the kind you find in a quick-fix networking book, but the kind rooted in a deep understanding of people and of yourself. Kind that lets you influence without manipulation, connect without pretense, and lead without losing your integrity. Success in the real world rarely belongs to the person with the highest IQ or the busiest schedule. More often, it favors the one who understands a simple but uncomfortable truth. People do not act on logic, they act on emotion. If you can't read and navigate those emotions, both your own and others, you will end up trapped in invisible battles, subtle resistance, and relationships that stall your progress without you even realizing why. Advanced social strategy isn't about being the smoothest talker in the room. It's about seeing clearly through others without losing sight of yourself. You don't need a psychology degree, but you do need the sensitivity to notice when someone is speaking through hesitation, body language, or tone rather than words. Some no's never leave someone's lips. You see them in the way their eyes shift, in the pause before they answer, in the sudden coolness of their voice. Timing matters more than eloquence. Pitch a great idea when someone's stressed or defensive, and it will die before it lands. Real social mastery is recognizing that everyone is wearing a mask and knowing how not to be pulled into their performance. The co-worker who never stops joking might be terrified of becoming irrelevant. The distant, cold manager might be drowning under private pressures. Seeing this doesn't make you soft, it makes you strategic. The first rule: filter your emotions before releasing your ideas. This isn't about being fake, it's about being effective. When you feel dismissed or manipulated, your impulse might be to strike back. But the Stoic approach is clear. Never respond from mood, respond from vision. Anger might feel like power in the moment, but it's a debt you end up paying yourself. You have the right to feel it. You also have the responsibility not to weaponize it. Take the young employee who was repeatedly interrupted in meetings. Her first urge was to quit in frustration. Instead, she calmly asked for a private conversation. "I've noticed I'm often interrupted. Am I unclear when I'm present?" Her team lead paused, then admitted, "I'm sorry. I've been under too much pressure and haven't managed it." Well, one conversation carried out with calm saved not just a job but a professional relationship. Another example: you pitch an idea and a colleague subtly undermines it. The reflex? Snap, scoff, or stew silently. The strategy? Stay calm and say, "I sense you have a different view. Could you share it? I'd like to understand better." That single sentence turns a potential conflict into a controlled exchange, one where you lead by asking, not attacking. The advanced player also anticipates emotions before they surface. A denied raise may not trigger an outburst in the moment, but it might cause quiet disengagement that eventually kills productivity. An unhappy client might never complain, they'll just disappear. Spot the early signs: avoidance, shorter replies, less eye contact, and you can intervene before the damage is irreversible. Sometimes all it takes is, "I get the sense something's off. Can we talk privately?" And sometimes the smartest move is not repair, but release. The friend who only calls when they need something. The colleague who drains your energy. The relationship that requires you to betray your values just to stay in it. The Stoics were clear. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because the highest social strategy isn't climbing higher in someone else's estimation. It's not falling into self-betrayal when others spiral. It's walking into a room full of critics and remaining unmoved, not because you're cold, But because you know your worth doesn't live in their approval, you can train this daily. When someone tries to make you feel small, stay calm. Respond firmly, but without hostility. When you're ignored in a discussion, don't fight for space with noise. Win it with excellence. One professional began sending detailed pre-meeting reports instead of competing for airtime. Soon, her manager was asking her to present to the team. Quiet consistency will outlast loud demands. Social strategy is a long game. The Stoics excelled at it because they never tied their worth to public opinion. Every interaction was a chance to display integrity and composure, not to score points. Success is not the number of people who like you. It's the number of people who respect you, even if they disagree with you. And that only happens when you learn to express without imposing, listen without submitting, confront without attacking, and communicate without losing yourself. The Stoics didn't speak to win hearts, they spoke to remain true. That is what makes them unforgettable. In the end, success will not be claimed by the cleverest or the most charming. It will belong to those who live deeper, relate smarter, and lead themselves better. And when you master that, you'll never need to fit in. People will find you. Of course, this isn't instant. It's not a tactic, it's a lifetime practice. Every conversation, every disagreement, every test of your composure is training. Emotional intelligence and social mastery are not finish lines. They are the beginning of a lifelong journey. And in that journey, the Stoics' rule is simple. We don't train to be perfect. We train to never quit, because we weren't born to avoid emotions. We were born to feel them fully and still choose wisely. To truly live, not just survive like a weed bending to every gust of wind, but to grow like a tree, deeply rooted yet rising through every storm, requires more than instinct. It requires practice. It requires reason. It demands a lifelong commitment to refining the mind, mastering emotions, and showing up in the world with integrity. The Stoics understood this long before emotional intelligence became a modern buzzword. For them, it was not a self-help accessory. It was proof of inner dignity. And in our era, where every like, comment, headline, and clickbait is designed to manipulate your emotions for profit, the simple act of slowing down, noticing your feelings, and responding with calm clarity is nothing less than a quiet rebellion. But mastery doesn't arrive in one dramatic moment. It's built slowly, through years of repetition, journaling honestly, practicing deep breathing, listening without interrupting, accepting feedback without flinching, and sometimes just sitting still with discomfort instead of rushing to escape. Because when the world outside grows loud and chaotic, the one thing left in your control is the clarity within. And that clarity begins with a deceptively simple question most people avoid. What am I really feeling right now? Do you lash out when criticized? Do you shrink when misunderstood? Do you blame others when you don't feel loved? These reactions are not wrong. But if you never examine them, they will control you like a puppet on strings. Stoic practice is not about suppressing these emotions. It's about understanding them so they stop ruling you. A sailor cannot stop the waves, but they can adjust the sails. Sometimes the bravest act isn't confronting another person. It's sitting quietly with your own anger, sadness, or envy and saying, I see you, but you don't get to steer the ship. This is why Stoics write, not to complain, but to dissect themselves with a blade of reason. If you were angry at being overlooked in a meeting, ask yourself, are you truly angry at them or at the story you're telling yourself about your worth? EQ begins when you dare to question the source of your own emotions. Emotions are not facts. They are signals. Just as a fever is a symptom, not the disease, feelings point to deeper truths. The wise neither suppress emotions nor blindly follow them. One deep breath before reacting can save a relationship, prevent an argument, or stop a bad decision from leaving your lips. And the truth is, you've never made your best decision while gasping for air. Every time you stay calm when someone else is angry, you add a new fold to your inner strength. Every time you ask, am I reacting to this moment or to old wounds? You win over yourself. And to the Stoics, that is the only victory that truly matters. But here's the thing. This journey has no graduation day. There's no final exam, no medal for completion, only practice. Some days you'll fail. You'll lose your temper. You'll say something you wish you hadn't. But reflection turns even failure into growth. Review your week. Choose one moment, an argument, a lapse in patience, or even a time you stayed silent when you should have spoken. Break it down and ask, how could I handle this better next time? Don't wait for emotional explosions to practice EQ. Train when you are calm, the way a soldier drills during peace. Listen to others, not to please them, but to sharpen your humility and see without judgment. EQ is not about pleasing everyone, it's about creating space for others to be themselves without losing who you are. Treat yourself like a work in progress. Set EQ goals the way you'd set fitness goals, structured, consistent, trackable. Celebrate small wins, the time you kept your cool under pressure, the conversation you navigated without defensiveness, the evening you ended with peace instead of regret. These small victories are the building blocks of an unshakable foundation. And yes, this road can feel lonely. You will have days when you wonder why you're practicing EQ in a world full of people who don't care. But that's exactly when you remember. You're not learning EQ to change the world. You're learning it so the world cannot change you for the worse. That is freedom. That is power. And it's why the Stoics never acted for recognition. They acted because it was right in the end. Think about the people you admire most. They're not the ones who dominate a room with noise. They are the ones who manage their emotions with grace, who speak with calm clarity, who can hold firm without becoming hard. That's the path worth walking, not for a day, not for a year, but for a lifetime. If this is who you want to become, calm under pressure, wise in relationships, unshaken by the storms of life, then emotional intelligence isn't optional. It's a personal responsibility. There's no graduation day, no certificate that says you've mastered this. The deeper you go, the more you realize how much more there is to understand, to refine, to restrain, and to empathize with. And that's not a sign of failure, it's a sign of awakening. Like Paul wrote to the Philippians, not that I have already obtained all this or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on. This isn't just about faith. It's about anyone who is serious about living well. You will stumble. You will lose your patience. But if you keep asking yourself, can I handle it better next time? Then you are still on the path. And that path, however long, is always worth walking. Over this journey, we've explored 14 powerful ways to master emotional intelligence and social skills through the lens of Stoic philosophy, not as a list of quick hacks, but as a disciplined inward journey of growth. We began by redefining emotional intelligence, stripping away the fluff and focusing on what truly matters. We turned inward to recognize ourselves and regulate our emotions. Before they could sweep us away, we learned to read the room without, losing our authenticity, to cultivate empathy without becoming a doormat, to spark inner motivation when the world feels heavy, and to communicate with clarity even when disagreements rise. We carried EQ into our workplaces, our homes, and our most personal relationships where the stakes are highest and the masks come off. We practiced staying grounded in crisis, facing emotional wounds that run deeper than we admit, building quiet, confidence, and applying real-world social strategies that help us stand tall without stepping on others'. And finally, we arrived at the truth. Emotional intelligence is not a destination. It's a path with no finish line. A path where each day offers a chance to live with more depth, to see others more clearly, and to gain just a little more mastery over yourself than you had yesterday. That is how the Stoics lived. And it is how you can live too, if you're brave enough to start. If this message resonated with you, don't let it end here. Like this video, subscribe to StoicCraft, and turn on the bell not just to catch the next lesson, but to remind yourself that every day is training day for your mind. You're not just watching. You're sharpening the one skill that will outlast every storm. Emotional mastery.